Creation is a funny thing. I think we don't see ourselves when we are in action. In this type of work, real creativity is about letting go. An actor has to let go before an audience to release his creativity, whereas I go searching for it within.
A year after the publication of his graphic novel, Bug, Enki Bilal is currently working on the second volume. The story is set in 2041 in the midst of a worldwide IT crash creating paralyzing havoc.
So right now, I'm in front of a computer, but I want it to be clear. I don't draw on the computer. I don't have a tablet. Basically, it's all done by hand. The computer is just for assembling the elements of the story. I do the editing and write in the speech bubbles directly. So this is the work in progress for the second volume of Bug. Here, for example, we have a page showing the reunion between Ob and Gemma, the main characters. Here you have a sketch, a layout of the image as I imagine it. And here is the same image, which I have painted since. So there it is. So here is Gemma, Ob, and the old Bonifacio, who is Corsican, as you can tell by his name. What I can do, for example, if I take this image, I can make it a bit denser. This is too much, but I can play on things like that. What else can I do? I can also saturate the image. Sometimes that's interesting. So this is where things come together, where the editing is done. The drawing and painting is done over there, so I'm always going back and forth. Sometimes I'll have to check whether a drawing from over there will fit into a double page over here. So I'm often coming back here with the drawing in my hand to check whether it works.
Enki Bilal has been exploring the subject of time for 40 years. From memories to transmission, he draws the past and sketches the future. There is no future without memory.
It started out like this, with this sketch. It's rather quickly done. The kiss stands out. I don't know which way it might go. And here, this is the end result. So a small sketch becomes big and colorful. You can see things have changed. The characters have changed. She's the Roman starlet in levitation, suspended above Rome, stuck by the global crash. An extremely rare accident, but that happens. A whole survival system has been set up for her. And as she is stuck up there, she ends up getting married there. It's painted and worked on, but obviously not finished. I still have some work to do on it. I mixed different techniques here. It's acrylic, obviously, with pastels and some watercolors here and there. Watercolors mixed into the acrylic is rather interesting in terms of colors and nuances. So this is what is then scanned and edited on the computer.
There are people who were influenced by illustrators, painters, etc. And all of a sudden, they turn up and impose a new world. Like all of us on the science fiction scene, Enki's world is his vision of a possible future. His technique, his touch in painting, and his way of seeing things have helped the genre to evolve. And that is admirable. Here we are facing a blank page, and on this page we invent a world.
In French, the word bug refers to a glitch in a computer program. In English, it's colloquial for an insect or virus.
Bug imposed itself on me. I'm not too sure how. Maybe because we are so deeply involved in this digital world. We have become slaves to our smartphones, tablets and computers. I don't know when or how, but I started wondering, what if we were deprived from these tools that were imposed on us and to which we have become unreasonably attached? And that's how it started. All of a sudden, everything disappears and ends up inside the head of one man. It's a bit like a fable, and that suits me. It's a rather free narrative, where I don't have to explain why or how. That's how the first volume was born, with the idea of making a second one, which I'm finishing now. And there will have to be at least a third one.
In the first volume of Bug, Cameron Obe, the only survivor from a mission to Mars, progressively discovers that his brain has access to the entire world's digital data. His body is host to an extraterrestrial parasite. A blue stain on his face keeps on getting larger, as he desperately strives to return to Earth and reunite with his daughter Gemma.
So here is the image. I'll reframe it a bit. That's not bad. Looks interesting, but we can do better. The image is nearly in place. I master everything here. I don't have an assistant, I'm alone. It's a bit of an artist-artisan thing, but my freedom is total. And one mustn't take the easy way out and think, I can show everything and draw pretentiously. It's useless. Each story requires a type of narration, and Bug's narration is a much more realistic story than my previous works, and requires more sobriety and efficiency. So we have something that is less graphically spectacular, but more efficient in terms of storytelling.
Enki Bilal's work is that of a great author, which everyone agrees about, but also that of a great artist. It's quite surprising to see how he creates environments and atmospheres that stand out throughout the narration, in the way it is put together, the editing. And it sheds light onto the evolution of his style, which is so characteristic. Here, for example, is one of his originals. It's no longer a crayon-based drawing, which is then covered over with China ink before adding color. Here it is directly sketched with lead or charcoal as if they were the first sketches. We can see Bilal wasn't thinking page by page, but rather image by image. It is important to acknowledge the extent to which Bilal is liberated from everything conventional. He has freed himself from the constraints of creating graphic novels in favor of the drawings themselves, in favor of artistic creation.
Le dessin privilégie la création artistique proprement dite.
In 1994, Enki Bilal paints his first canvases from the series Blue Song. He now returns to painting with a new series titled Oxymore.
Three sisters. Vaguely inspired by Chekhov, maybe, I don't know. But I brought something else to it, so as to have a canvas I could really begin working with.
Voilà, ça va être bon. Voilà, c'est tout. Voilà, l'après.
When you look at Bilal's work, you realize that he's always in search of a broader frame. His path takes him towards the world of painting, returns him back to the world of painting. I think that if Bilal had been born 100 years earlier, he would have never have made graphic novels. He would have gone straight to painting. But there was something so attractive and sexy about graphic novels, as it was an emerging and exciting new form of art at the time. I turned up when graphic novels were already well established. They participated in making it that way. So when I look at the period of Bilal's work, where he draws these wide horizontal frames, I feel like he's trying to get closer to the world of painting.
Oxymore, oxymoron in English, is a word of Greek origin defined by the use of two contradictory words used to illustrate a paradox, an alliance of contradictions that allows us to express the unconceivable, whilst leaving free rein to the imagination.
One thing I like about the way I evolved is that I attended art school for only 3 months, so I didn't learn a lot of the techniques. But I discovered them along the way as I felt the need to evolve. I found them out by myself. I started with a clear line too, stroke-by-stroke drawing with China ink. At a certain point, I started working on volumes. That's what interested me, and I was quite influenced by Gustave Doré. He is the printmaker I studied closely. This crisscross technique that made volumes appear led me to want to paint. I was an illustrator who very quickly gave up on trying to enclose a drawing and tried to work on volumes within a matter. And before arriving to painting, I worked on this crisscrossing, which is the same but in black and white and meant for printmaking.
One day Enki turned up in an edition of Pilote magazine. It was wonderful. He brought something new to the table, which was a plus. In this crazy line of work, you can think that you're doing well, that you've created a successful artificial world. Then someone new arrives, and that someone must be accepted. He brings a quintessential quality, his intelligence and a graphic novelty. We got to know each other at the time and became friends.
Like Tintin et Spirou, Pilote was a weekly magazine focused on comic strips and graphic novels. The greatest French-speaking illustrators were all published in Pilote. During the 70s, Pilote was headed by René Goscinny and was full of talented illustrators, including Tardy, Druillet, Giroux, Mébius, Mézières, and many others. Then, in the mid-70s, Pilote imploded, giving way to other publications such as L'Écho des Savanes or Métal Hurlant. Graphic novels and comic strips were becoming an adult way of expression, and that is greatly thanks to Pilote.
The illustrators of the time were really all about the drawing, didn't necessarily want much meaning in their drawings. The illustrations didn't have much of a narrative purpose, but expressed pure emotion. Nowadays, illustrations are more narrative and tend to serve the narrative. At the time of Druillet and the crowd from Métal Hurlant, it took quite an effort to understand what they were going on about.
Enki's message was received immediately. He brought us to a new place on the pyramid of graphic novels and opened the way for future talent. He brought an essential piece of work to the table.
Lorsque je peins des visages, lorsque je dessine des visages,
When I paint or draw faces,
quand même souvent et toujours le regard. Le point de
I always
départ.
start with the look in the
J'ai
eyes.
besoin d'être appâté par
Maybe I need to be lured
le
by the
regard
eyes I'm being confronted to.
de celui auquel je suis
In any
confronté.
case, it's always
C'est
a
une confrontation,
confrontation.
de toute façon. Les personnages ont souvent les yeux pas cernés, mais
My characters
marqués
often
aussi.
have weathered eyes
Ça aussi, c'est
because I find it makes them look more moving.
Je suis complètement
I'm utterly moved by the eyes in Enki Bilal's work.
des regards chez Enki Bilal.
It's what I call his abysmal irises.
Des iris abysses. C'est-à-dire que
The look
le
in his
regard,
character's eyes takes us below the surface, plunging us deep into the character's soul.
qu'on plonge comme ça dans l'âme de l'individu.
That's the starting point for my writing, that emotion emanating from those eyes.
À partir de ce regard,
Ingrid Astier, c'est une romancière très.
The specific thing about Ingrid Astier as a novelist is that she has the talent of integrating the environment she wants to depict and in which she will literally live. That is how she came to contact me, asking, would you accept to be a character in my new novel, Haute Voltige?
Haute voltige.
I was obviously very flattered, but knowing her, I was also a bit worried.
c'est une idée qui est venue très naturellement parce que je me suis
The idea
inspirée
came to me
d'un
very
fait divers au
naturally.
début.
At first, I was loosely inspired by a local news story of this person who stole from the Paris Modern Art Museum.
Et,
And I wondered what I would have wanted to steal had I been in the daredevil's shoes. And the answer came to me immediately. It was obvious. It would be the works of Enki Bilal.
Dans Haute Voltige, il y a toute
In
une
Haute
scène
Voltige, there is this moment where the burglar breaks into Enki Bilal's studio, and that's something I worked on by spending time there with Enki.
également en suivant
I was
Enki
really
Bilal
able
dans
to
son
slip
atelier.
into the skin of the
Je peux
character.
vraiment me glisser dans sa peau.
There was a kind of migration into the character itself.
De migration dans la peau du personnage.
L'oxymore, c'est un.
I love the word oxymoron, and I love what it means.
C'est un trouble
It's
des
like a
sens.
disturbance to the
Ça
senses.
provoque comme une espèce de.
Oxymorons induce a kind of despair and some incomprehension as well. Cold equator, for example. What's the point of bringing together these contradictory terms? I chose this as a theme simply because the role of painting is to produce the same sort of effect. No explanation is needed when you look at a painting. It's a generic term that can apply to all of my paintings. The exhibition in New York was a way of showing my work on the other side of the Atlantic. Even though I'm already well known there, it was an opportunity. I've kept good memories of it.
Et voilà, c'est un bon souvenir, un beau souvenir.
Ce que j'aimerais dire simplement, c'est que
What I'd simply like to say, and this might seem strange, is that I don't consider this work completed.
ce qui est extraordinaire,
The extraordinary thing is to be able to show my work in such a magnificent place, and to be confronted to it like some sort of critique.
son propre travail comme une espèce de critique. Là, je suis
I get to discover the work outside of the workshop with more hindsight and in a different light.
avec un recul différent, avec une lumière différente. Et le
I'm very happy that the starting point for this exhibition's itinerary is here in New York.
New York, l'itinéraire
This itinerary will allow me to go beyond what we have here, which is something to be excited about.
et ça, c'est
I feel like a painting should never be complete, and I will make sure that it won't be complete by the end of this process.
ce processus.
I consider a painting should never be finished. Past a certain point, you begin to close the painting. I think a painting has to remain open. So here I just added a layer simply out of frustration. One artist I particularly admire for his sense of when to stop is Basquiat. When you look at his work, you can tell it's never complete, it's in progress. To reminisce about his paintings gives us a sense of freedom. It produces a very dynamic and positive feeling. That's how I feel about it.
The entire world's digital data is now enclosed inside the brain of one man, Cameron Aube. His safe return to Earth has become of paramount importance. But his priority is to find his daughter, Gemma, who has been kidnapped by the mafia.
This is a place that has become totally digital-free since the bug. Aube and Gemma stop over there to try and find fuel and realize it is inhabited by a group of neo-communists, aiming to bring back Marxism without repeating the mistakes that were made in the past century. There's this series of events, of storylines opening up. It's interesting to develop because you can't help but ask yourself the question, at least I can't, of what the future would look like if we had to start over from scratch from a scientific point of view. It's an interesting question to ask yourself. Here, for example, is the blue stain. Julia comes up with a simple idea, to buy foundation in order to dissimulate the blue stain. So that's what she does. She finds some foundation and applies it to Aube's face. The problem is, the stain absorbs the foundation and the blue color remains. So there will be an explanation for that. I don't know which one, but I will come up with something.
Enki Bilal arrived in Paris at the age of 10 to join his father, who had left 5 years prior. Drawing quickly becomes his refuge. As for the French language, it becomes a tool to tell stories. His childhood memories from Belgrade in ex-Yugoslavia in the early 1950s are that of a city torn apart by the violence of war. The image of this city insidiously remains graphically and aesthetically throughout his work.
Bilal showed the will to depict things in a state of decrepitness, of abandonment. When he decides to show us a city, it's always a city in ruins, in a state of decomposition. Bilal has a sort of poetic relationship to misery, decrepitness, chaos, and despair. It's quite a dark vision.
I feel like I've drawn a lot of ruins. And after all, if I have, it's because I was born amongst them. They're part of my life. I found them beautiful. As a child, I found the bullet-impacted walls of Belgrade to be beautiful. This played well for Tito, who was very proud that children found it beautiful. It comforted him in the idea that he should continue to rule his country while strengthening the cult status of his personality.
Although his first publications were science fiction, Enki Bilal quickly evolved towards more historical and political content. The memories from his childhood spent in Tito's Yugoslavia led him to the work on the subject of the ending of the Soviet bloc, well before the destruction of the Berlin Wall. In Patrie du Chasse, co-signed by the screenwriter Pierre Christian, he depicts the decline of the Soviet Union by illustrating a murder committed during a bear hunt, organized by a communist dignitary.
Incredible. An alien. I'll emphasize the wounds here. I had a way of doing it. How did I do it?
Yeah, to take this off, this part,
Yes.
we'd be better off using a bigger tool to scratch this off, remember?
Okay. Should I heat it up?
You can heat it up.
I find Séverine's work as a sculptor to be very touching. Her birds, for instance, have both a fragile quality coupled with a very strong execution. There is something about her work which is unstoppable and elegant at the same time. I had the idea of making a bear, ours in French, which later became ours, U-R-S. I wondered how she would approach the subject. We truly collaborated on every stage of the process. She brought me into the world of sculpture. That was very important. She decided to give the bear feathers, and I said, "What are these feathers?" And she said, "No, don't touch it, it's great." So I intervened here and there, smoothed over certain things. I added some elements, and the animal started to take form, physically but also geopolitically, with its red star in its back, and the upside-down hammer and sickle.
We were thinking of having it be darker at the bottom and lighter towards the top.
What is he doing exactly? Is he adding gold? It looks yellow, right?
No, he's emphasizing the greens with oxide.
In fact, he's full of history.
Yes, there's a lot going on. But that's also because you put a lot into it.
Yes, but all the symbols, they come from your world. The feathered finish, etc. It suits him really well. I've kind of mistreated him. He's spent a rough time with me. There's nearly a century of communism from 1917 to the fall of the Berlin Wall. It's the heritage of this huge enterprise that failed. Hence the sickle and upside-down hammer and the red star in his back. You see, these marks are the challenges of time, the challenges of a violent past, of both internal and external struggles, the contradictions of communism, and there were many. And that obviously will leave some marks.
There, that's good.
Here, our young man.
Enki knows how to express himself through graphic novels, but he also creates a whole world. And aside from the fact that we became friends, that is one of the reasons why we feel so in phase with each other. He does sculpture, painting, illustration, graphic novels, films. He is the man, the artist, who best represents the world we live in.
By imagining the outcome of issues created by a world that has become overly dependent on technology, Enki Bilal treats the question of memory in a forever accelerating world. He raises questions about artificial intelligence, an enigmatic and fascinating invention that is no longer confined to the world of science fiction.
So here we have a couple. It's not quite clear who is human and who isn't. You can see that this young man is missing half his body, but the young lady still seems happy to have him in her arms. It's a cover illustration, an original drawing for the newspaper Libération for their special edition on artificial intelligence. It's the second year running that they've done this, and I was put in charge of visually representing these evolutions in AI. Everything that goes through the minds of mathematicians nowadays, starting with Cédric Villani. That's what helps me invent this world and bring it into reality. It comes with a lot of questioning concerning the risks we take when we become mad scientists. It's an exciting subject, which is quite present throughout my stories.
Cédric Villani
is an out-of-the-ordinary person. I know he is fascinated by the near future of science and mathematics and their impact on humans. Augmented humans is a theme that speaks to us, perhaps more from an imaginary perspective on my behalf, whereas he is more steeped in reality. He sees things from the point of view of what can actually be done. In any case, he has a vision. He has a capacity to project himself as a free mind into areas of the future that interest me. It's always interesting to listen to someone like him speak, so it seemed like an obvious match. Are augmented humans a reality today? Is it beginning to be?
That depends on how you define augmented humans, but we already, let's say...
The slightest implant is already a form of...
Well, that depends on the point of view. The first point of view consists in considering all technology as an augmentation, as a tool that we own and that gives us new possibilities. You can argue that writing was an augmentation of our brain, of our intelligence, and that had very important consequences. Socrates warned people about the development of writing, and he saw it become generalized at the time and said, "We won't come out the other side of this unharmed. We will lose part of our ability to understand each other, lose part of our critical sense, and it will affect our memory." And he was right. But it opened up so many other possibilities.
You can say the same thing about a tablet, about smartphones. You can argue it's an extension of our brain.
It's an extension of our brain and of our senses, and we won't come out the other side unharmed. Something will be left behind.
We're already affected, I'd say.
We're already affected, and we had no idea to what extent we would be. Then comes the debate of what will happen to us in the flesh. What new implant will come and impact our faculties? That will be the real debate. I think at first it will be mainly for therapeutical uses, which is why I'm not too worried.
It's the positive aspect of things.
It is. It is. It will help people with epilepsy or people who have lost their eyesight, that sort of thing.
Despite this illustrator and storyteller creating an overly digitalized world, humans remain at the center of his stories. Enki Bilal depicts the impact of a global catastrophe from the perspective of the individual and shapes his characters, making sure they incarnate strong emotions.
Here I'm trying to create a character. It's rather interesting because he's destined to become Gemma's love interest. And the character I created in the first volume, called Amine, was destined to become her lover, her protector. I don't know why his physique displeased me so much, but I couldn't keep him by Gemma's side for the whole story. And I've turned him into a more interesting character. He's become a sort of, not quite a monster, but he's full of implants and completely unpredictable. He is capable of the most violent killings, and the next second he turns to something of a softie. And that's how I kept the idea of integrating a character who would become Gemma's protector. She's also very strong, so maybe she will end up having to protect him after a while. I'm looking for a... Obviously, he'll be a rather young character. I'm told that all my characters look alike. It's a criticism, I understand. It's a clear choice. They're all from the same family. In the end, the first person who needs to be convinced is the creator himself. I need to feel a connection with my characters, notably with the women, but with the men as well. They have a lot to do with each other. The female characters... I like for my men and women to resemble each other. I like that androgynous side. It's a part of my style.
Their faces can be so tough, with such sharp cheekbones, sharp chins, etc. If you cut off their hair, they become guys. It reminds me of that whole era of his with Partie de Chasse, for instance, where all his characters were super androgynous.
I ended up swallowing one, then another. Both red. A splash of water on my eyes to wash away my blue tears. Naked, I locked myself inside John's room with the script walker. A dark room, without a shadow of light. I began to write. Once upon a time, John and I.
There are details that need more precision in this face. Things that need to be accentuated. Pastel is always interesting. When it's big, there's a kind of... it's suave and dirty, but perfect. I find it sensual. I'm constantly remodeling things, especially in this type of drawing, where we are searching for volumes. Nothing is set in stone, so until the very last moment, things can change, in the eyes, for instance. I really love drawing characters. It's really my thing. I'm not much of a landscape artist. These are layers. It's the basis of my work. Everything you see here was the starting point for an image, a painting or an illustration, as it is the case here with the images of animals. What I find touching about this exhibition is that it is about pure drawing. Many people have told me, we're so happy to see all of this because we know your work with its colors, etc. But there's something magical about this, as if we were inside your laboratory, in your intimate space. It's true, that's exactly it.
Julia wasn't asleep. I reassured her concerning Hong and asked her the following question clearly. Do you know how the story ends in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet?
I don't understand anything of what's happening, Mr. Lawrence, but if you are a brother of the same name, then make me die.
Does Bilal have a creative protocol? Does Bilal have creative figures? Does he begin with a drawing or with a character? Does Bilal start with the text or with an image? Does he start with the memory of something he's read? Does he read Shakespeare again and gets the idea of how to remake Romeo and Juliet? Where should he start? What's his starting point?
I do start with the writing. It doesn't keep me from maybe drawing the 2 or 3 first images and then beginning to write, but the text usually comes first, because I have it in mind. Otherwise, sometimes from a whim of inspiration, or when the idea comes as a package of sequences, in that case I let myself go with the flow and just write. I let it unfold. What's interesting is that the drawing can sometimes turn out more powerful than I imagined, or express something already expressed in words. When that happens, I go back and take out the words to let the drawing speak for itself. That's why I do all that backing and forthing. For things like that, an idea will come to me and I will immediately sketch it out and integrate it to a setting so that I don't forget it. And then I come back to the writing.
What is beautiful are the stories we tell. Enki and I were both nourished by science fiction literature. We read it all, English, American, etc. And that's the future that we drew. We were so taken by all of this that we recreated our own worlds, playing by the same, how should I put it, by the same score. And now we can see the madness we had foreseen, which once again is the role of the artist, and it has become a reality. That is something that can create a strong anxiety within.
My science fiction influences come greatly from Anglo-Saxon literature. But it's true that Jules Verne had prepared me for it. Usually, you start off with Bradbury, then you move on to Asimov, Van Vogt, John Brunner, Philip K. Dick, Zelazny, and the list goes on. These imaginary worlds did me a lot of good, made me dream. I didn't find them to be so disconnected from the real world. That's what I liked about them, that these stories, these adventures were being experienced by humans. Humans still remain at the center of the plot in strong and powerful science fiction sagas. Humans still remain at the center of everything.
Since the very beginnings of Bilal's work, Baudelaire has been a central reference. Some of Bilal's characters directly quote Baudelaire, like Nicopole when he becomes mad in La Foire aux Immortels, or when he becomes amnesic in Froid Équateur.
Baudelaire was the poet who crystallized my brand new passion for the French language. I started out with the easier things to read, and Baudelaire was no doubt the first person I read and thought, how did he manage to string those words together? And what does this mean? It quickly became fascinating.
Along with Baudelaire, many other classical authors such as Nietzsche, Théophile Gautier, and Flaubert.
Be careful, my friend. Individuals meet only to collide, and each, bearing his torn entrails in his hands, accuses the other who is gathering up his own. Gustave Flaubert.
By using a quote, by integrating it into a narrative, a creation, you're adding to it by giving it an extra layer of meaning. It's an opening, and it injects the qualities of the author you are quoting into the story. It's an enrichment. It's important not just to look pretty, but to be anchored in the narrative at very specific points.
The secret for traveling comfortably, said Dostoevsky, consists in politely listening to other people's lies and try your hardest to believe them. You don't deserve for me to be lying.
Bilal joue sur les frontières, joue sur les lignes.
Bilal plays with borders, plays with lines, barriers. Anything that marks a separation. May it be political, the border of a country, or the line that separates a character from the rest of the drawing. In Bacon's work, at first you see a drawing, and then all of a sudden a body appears, as if a rag had been dragged across the paint before it had had time to dry, to erase the lines between body and non-body. And this philosophy about frontiers, which appears to be central in Bilal's work, expresses itself aesthetically through his technique of blurring lines. Bacon did it, but Bilal does it too. It goes along with his rhetorical choices and the figures of speech he uses. The oxymoron is also a blurring device. Blurring frontiers, but also allowing them to overlap by juxtaposing opposite concepts. See how he mixes sports here with chess boxing. Once again, he's blurring lines. Sports come with a precise set of rules. And here, he's abolishing the frontier between chess and boxing to create a hybrid.
You are about to be, right here, the witnesses to the very first official chess boxing match in France.
Round one, chess.
C'est la prétention extrême suprême d'un personnage qui m'a amené à ça. Donc,
It was the extreme pretentiousness of my character from Cold Equator that led me to the idea. He thought he was the best, the most handsome, the most intelligent, and the strongest. So what is the best way to shine? That's when I had the idea of creating this sport, intertwining supreme intelligence and physical force, not only for the wrestler, but for the noble boxer. In essence, it's a grotesque sport.
Round 5. Chess.
But now that it exists, we realize it isn't grotesque at all.
I just found it too funny. I'm a total fan. The idea of combining the brutality of boxing and the cerebral side of chess, it just had to be invented.
No one has an entirely intact brain after 3 minutes of boxing.
Leonid Granit Chernabayev.
I've finished the narrative. The drawings have gaps that need coloring. I have to backtrack, which is particularly annoying. This isn't all finished, but we saw me work on this here, for example. This image has already been edited. I'll insert it here. This is like a blueprint, really. It's a kind of... All of this needs coloring. When I scroll through it, it's terrifying. I can't believe how many gaps I've left.
Even if he's passionate about graphic novels and he's been nourished by that, a contemporary artist must be multicultural. He's one of the rare artists to be truly multicultural. That's very important.
Wait, I shouldn't show you the end. Do I know what it is to be a graphic novel author, a writer, a director? I think I know what it's like to be myself, and that I face the challenge when it comes to writing or drawing, and I'm confronted to a blank canvas, a blank page. I put all of my energy into the project I need to complete. All of this are experiences, stages that allow me to remain who I am. I try to be as available as possible for my passion. My passion can express itself through painting, making film, etc. I'm exceptionally lucky. I just make the most of it to be creative.